So this week, Spotify made some big waves in the podcasting industry by opening up their new open access feature, which allows other publishers and third-party apps to integrate premium private content into Spotify. And so places like Supercast, if you use platforms like that to allow your listeners to support you financially and then either give them behind the scenes content or ad-free content in exchange, now they can actually get access to that within Spotify. So to break all this down, what it means and how you can utilize it to help your show, we actually invited Jason, who is the CEO of Supercast, to come on and join us here for Buzzcast. So Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Pleasure to be here, Travis. Thanks for inviting me on.
When you started working with Spotify, getting into this open access feature, because you were one of the first companies to really jump on it and say, this is really going to help our creators and it's going to help their listeners. What was really exciting about it to you? Like, why did you feel like this is a really good next step for helping creators be financially supported for the art that they're creating?
Yeah, so for us, our whole philosophy is very much, doing the right thing by creators and, really being creator-centric about, the solution that we offer. And in turn, often what that means is really starting with the listener. Because ultimately what serves the listeners the best is, what creators want and is the fuel that really allows them to build, really strong relationships and financial relationships, as well as content relationships with the premium version of their audience. From a philosophical point of view, the approach that we've always taken with Supercast is to allow creators to really go to where the listeners already are. And so what that means is that, if they've discovered your free podcast on Apple Podcasts, we want to make it as easy as possible for them to add the premium version of that podcast back into Apple Podcasts. It's like, your browser. You've already made your choice, as to what browser you use to browse the web. Same thing with podcast listening and audio listening in general. We don't want to have to force users to download a special app or change podcast player to be able to listen to the premium version of your audio. That's just unnecessary friction that ultimately means that people don't have an enjoyable experience. So broadly, that's the way we've approached things right from the beginning, is to really embrace the open ecosystem, and build on top of that technology that already allows people to pick and choose, the tool and the listening player that they prefer to use. The exception to that has been Spotify. Up until now, the exception to that has been Spotify, in that, yes, you can absolutely listen to music and podcasts now on Spotify, but from a private podcast point of view, they've been a closed ecosystem in that you cannot add a show by URL in the same way that you can with Apple Podcasts or Overcast or Pocket Casts or Castro or any other, kind of open ecosystem player. You haven't been able to kind of add your own show by URL, which is a departure from the way every other player supports private podcasting, and means that if you use, as a creator, if you offer a premium podcast to your paying subscribers, they unfortunately can't add it to Spotify. And so that's been, quite frankly, disappointing to Spotify listeners to date. But as a result of, the recent announcement and Spotify opening up, their open access platform, it now means that we can add in Spotify as a choice, which we're extremely excited about. One, because we're kind of like working with them to test out this new technology. They're doing it in a slightly different way from RSS, using a technology called OAuth, where you basically have to log in with your Spotify account to add the premium show into your Spotify app. But what it means is that now all of those Spotify listeners that previously would have to change podcast player can now, of course, add that show into Spotify and get the same seamless experience as everybody else.
So that's great. Spotify is now opening it up, starting to play nice in the sandbox with everyone else that's creating software and tools for podcasters.
Right.
So from your perspective, what's in it for Spotify? Like, why would Spotify now decide, you know what, we really should start utilizing these other tools, these other innovations that people are working on to make the podcast listening experience better and to potentially get people to like us more than they have in the past?
Yeah, it's a great question. If you think back to where Spotify has come from, they started out, purely as a music app, as a way for you to essentially, have the entire of the world's music catalog, in your pocket and available where, you don't have to think about, like which albums do I want to buy, which tracks do I want to buy, like it's literally just all there for you to stream, on a on-demand basis. And of course, over the past couple of years, they've had a big push into podcasting. And, they've done it, their way, they have kind of like come up with a way that, like fits, their way of doing things as well as, their strategic objectives and values. But ultimately, what they want to be is the platform where people listen to all kinds of audio. They just want to be, the first thing people think about when they think about, like listening to something, whether that be music or podcasts. And so, from their perspective, or my read on their perspective, is that if they can do that with podcasting, but then there is this friction that they are creating for themselves when a listener wants to upgrade to a premium experience and then has to change their podcast player to be able to listen to the premium version of a podcast. You're advancing your mission on one hand, but then for the very most engaged listeners, you're breaking the experience. They're hearing all of these calls to sign up as a premium subscriber and then ultimately, having to leave your platform to be able to participate in those. I think they realized that, that was just going to be, kind of like showing listeners the door. And so this is a strategically smart move on their behalf. They essentially, by creating this technology, they're, kind of rejoining somewhat, kind of the open approach that, everybody else has taken. And, I think it's a smart move on their behalf just to make sure that their listeners, at least have a similar experience to everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a season where everyone was trying to be the Netflix of podcasts, and that was a term that was thrown around a lot, like Luminary, the Netflix of podcasts, and I don't even know anyone that has a Luminary subscription, right. And then Spotify is like, we're gonna be the go-to place we're gonna win podcasting, we're gonna be the YouTube of podcasts, and over time, as these kind of new entrants into the game realized, oh, there's actually an entrenched listener behavior here that we're trying to break for our own interests. It didn't really work the way that they thought it would. And so it's nice to see Spotify kind of softening up to that initial stance of we're just going to keep everything closed, internal, and we're just going to kind of own it front to back, to now saying, you know what, maybe it's better for us to play the content game, to start signing these exclusive deals, getting creators to come over, and really focusing on serving creators. So I'm super excited to hear news like this, that Spotify is starting to reach out to creators. Now, I know a lot of people will see this press release, or they'll hear about it, and they'll say, that's curious. Didn't Apple just talk about premium subscriptions like a few weeks ago? And so as someone who is not on the inside at all of these conversations, how long has this interaction, have you guys been working with Spotify kind of paving the way for this open access feature? Does it predate that Apple announcement, or was like it been something that you've been working on for a while, or is it relatively recent?
It was more recent, just going off what's available in the public. Obviously Apple made their announcement, that they were, launching Apple Podcast subscriptions, and then
launching in air quotes.
That's right. That's right.
It took a while to get out there, but
that's right. And then Spotify, came second with, like their announcement. So they had the advantage of being able to obviously look at what Apple had done and then, decide to propose something slightly differently, slightly different in an attempt to woo creators. Ultimately, they came out with some, subscription offerings and this open access platform, which is quite a different approach to, of course, what Apple is coming out with. I think ultimately we're now kind of embroiled in this kind of platform war where, creators have the luxury of choice. But ultimately, each of those platforms has their own vested interests. Apple wants you to use Apple Podcasts. Spotify wants you to use, Spotify's podcast player. And so it's, just kind of like this trade-off of, kind of like trying to out-compete each other. But what I would say, about, both of those platforms and their subscription offerings is that you just have to think about, from your point of view, your own selfish point of view as a creator, what are the catches, when I sign up to any particular programs, and particularly subscription programs with these big platforms, because in most cases, and certainly, what we've seen with Apple subscriptions and Spotify subscriptions is that it works a little bit like Apple's App Store. Of course, this has been all over the news recently, and it's a pretty high fee, at 30% of your your revenue that you have to pay out to Apple. But then secondly, you just have no control and no relationship with your audience. And that is a big, big catch that, it's looking like both, we know Apple, certainly, doesn't want to give you access to, who is a paying subscriber or how to contact them. And, we're pretty sure Spotify subscription program will probably be the same. This is separate to the open access platform that we're talking about today.
Right.
But, that is the catch.
Hey, Travis here. We hope you enjoyed that clip from Buzzcast. If you want to listen to the entire episode, you can listen to the audio version in your favorite podcast app, and we'll leave a link to that in the description below. Or if you want to watch the video version, you can find that on our Buzzcast YouTube channel. So you can just click the subscribe button right up here to go and get new episodes as they come out every other week. Or you can click this image down here to watch the full version of this episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, keep podcasting.